fast follower is this often a smart choice. But given the dynamism that we're seeing and we're likely to see in the decade ahead, actually, it's a much smarter business choice to be the innovator, be the pioneer, and develop some of these breakthroughs rather than being caught off guard by them. Yeah, that's a question that many of the businesses that I work with are wrestling with. I think there's a lot of concern currently around greenwashing, and rightly so. Particularly with the reputational risks around it, but also with all of the regulation that we're seeing coming through, particularly from the EU. And yeah, it's a big concern for businesses. Obviously, there's a lot of backlash as well in places like North America and the politicization of ESG. So I think what we are seeing more and more is green hushing, where businesses are doing really good stuff around sustainability, but are not communicating it or are not talking about it. And that is an issue, that is a problem, because to make progress on these issues, we need many businesses, all of the incumbents and all of the businesses across key sectors to be taking action and to be being seen to be taking action and to sort of create that sense of momentum. So talking about what you're doing, talking about your goals, talking about what you're achieving, sharing what you're learning is central to sort of creating the broader, more systemic impact that's needed. So we're real proponents at Forum for the Future of what we call green doing. So setting ambitious targets, taking bold action, and communicating the actions that you're taking and the ambitions that you're setting. It's not always about only communicating what you've already done. Obviously, you need to have, it's good to have a track record and good to have substance behind what you're doing. But there's real power also in communicating your ambition for what you need, what you want to achieve, because in signaling that ambition, that will attract partners, collaborators, and people that want to be part of realizing that vision. So we would really advocate the communication both of bold ambitions, but also of the actual tangible substance that sits behind that. And it's also about engagement and being kind of authentic about sort of what you're struggling with. So we'd always say it's better to sort of aim high and set a target based on what the world needs and engage, make a really good effort to achieve that and engage authentically around that and communicate, if you are falling short, what you're struggling with, rather than, setting a really low achievable target that isn't what's needed and easily achieving it. That isn't going to get us where we need to get to. The most pressing issues for any specific business will be as unique as the business themselves. The sort of most relevant, most material issues will completely depend on the sector that you're in, what your business does. So, it's hard to sort of answer that question generically. Obviously, though, there are some issues that are really time critical. Climate in particular is we know that we have a narrow window of opportunity, over the balance of this decade, probably the next sort of 5-6 years, where we still have an opportunity to sort of mitigate the worst impacts of climate breakdown. We need 50% decarbonisation, by the end of this decade in order for that to really be possible. So we need a massive transformation across all sectors, and we also need that to happen rapidly to avoid some of the critical tipping points that we know we will cross if we don't take that action. So that's an obvious one. But when we look at the rate of biodiversity loss, how, particularly after the pandemic, how the numbers on inequality are kind of really going in the wrong direction in many places. I think what business leaders are facing is really a polycrisis. So multiple, very sort of challenging contextual issues that are all interrelated and compounding. So it's not like climate change is just an environmental issue. It's also clearly like a very big social issue with huge health implications. And it's interconnected with, nature and inequality, and, not addressing those interconnected issues will make every one of those issues worse as they compound. But then also positively, successfully addressing some of those issues and finding solutions that solve for multiple issues simultaneously, as taking smarter, more effective approaches to really get to the root causes of some of these challenges, can have compounding benefits as well. So I think there's many issues, but what's important is that you're approaching them in the right way, with the right sense of urgency, but also understanding the interconnections and not trying to address issues in isolation. And really what's needed for that is a new way of thinking and acting. And what I see a lot with the business leaders that are most successfully navigating this is an understanding that the operating context that their businesses are facing are fundamentally different now than they were for the relatively stable and benign operating context that most senior business leaders have enjoyed for most of their career. We've seen in IKEA, they've moved away from fixed sort of strategy roadmaps to just using scenario planning for their forward business planning, because they recognize how volatile their operating context is, their value chains, and therefore the idea that you can map out what you're doing for the next 8 quarters or however long is just a complete fallacy. It's made up. So they've shifted to scenario planning for their business planning, and I think what we're increasingly seeing is enlightened business leaders understanding that and really making the very difficult choice of facing into it and understanding that they need to think and act differently, and embracing a kind of a new approach to managing their businesses. I think one of the things that is abundantly clear is that we have all of the technology that we need to tackle climate change. So initiatives like Project Drawdown really highlight how it's not that we, just applying current technologies and existing technologies at scale will get us to a point where we're drawing down more carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases than we're emitting. So it's not like there's this huge conundrum around new technology that doesn't exist. So a lot of what's needed with technology is just deployment and mainstreaming and scaling. But that is no small feat. So sort of the amount of infrastructure and investment and business opportunity around that is absolutely massive. So when it comes to things like energy, now renewable energy is typically at a lower cost than fossil fuels, and sometimes also the technology is really old technology. So particularly when it comes to the agriculture sector, a lot of the regenerative agriculture techniques that many businesses are seeking to scale now are based on very old forms of things like crop rotation and cover crops that have been in indigenous knowledge or practiced by farmers for really long periods of time. So it's not always about the latest shiny new thing. There are areas where technology is definitely needed, particularly around hard to abate sectors, and areas like flight, things like green hydrogen, and for sort of steel production and other sort of heavy industries. So technology is definitely needed, and we are seeing incredible breakthroughs. I think particularly when it comes to some of the types of protein, so meat or dairy protein that are very greenhouse gas intensive. The breakthroughs that we're seeing around things like precision fermentation are absolutely incredible, and will completely reshape entire industries, over the next 5 to 10 years. So there definitely is a lot of disruption and some really promising technologies that are sort of on the cusp of kind of mainstreaming, we think. But I think it's important also not to sort of be aware that actually we have so much technology already, and it's often just about scaling that. One of the things that is really exciting, I think, for business leaders is the opportunity about like a challenge like the climate crisis, the need for such rapid business transformation over the next 5 years, and the huge shifts that are needed. We've seen, I worked with Diageo, the leading drinks business globally, to set their 2030 strategy back in 2019. And one of the things that they really leaned into was what we call the innovation gap. So rather than setting a target based on what you can deliver with current technology and current costs, setting a target based on what the world needs, and then working to develop the breakthroughs and the innovations that can deliver that target at an affordable cost and at the pace that's needed. And obviously, you don't just do that and don't do anything. Diageo set up Diageo Sustainable Solutions, so an open innovation platform where they set out the key challenges where they needed new technologies, where needed things to scale in order for them to achieve their targets. And it's been incredibly successful. When we set the strategy, they've talked about fully decarbonising their operations by 2030, and a 50% decarbonisation of their supply chain. One of their biggest parts of their carbon footprint is glass bottle manufacturing as a premium drinks supplier. It wasn't possible when we set the strategy to produce zero carbon glass bottles. That technology didn't exist. Now they are in the process of piloting glass manufacturing facility in the UK, partnering with a supplier that will be a net zero, produce net zero glass bottles. And if they hadn't set that innovation gap and hadn't had the kind of courage to do that, that breakthrough wouldn't have come through. So I think there's a huge opportunity for businesses to challenge themselves and really be aware that actually doing nothing is often, in a more stable operating context, being a fast follower is often a smart choice. But given the dynamism that we're seeing and we're likely to see in the decade ahead, actually, it's a much smarter business choice to be the innovator, be the pioneer, and develop some of these breakthroughs rather than being caught off guard by them. I think the name of my organization, Forum for the Future, kind of alludes to the sort of futures perspective and the bigger perspective, I suppose, that I always try and bring into my talks. And I'd hope that an audience would leave with a kind of a sense of the bigger picture. I think particularly for people working in business, you're so focused on quarterly sales targets and you're often in the trenches. It's really helpful, I think, sometimes to have an external speaker who can come in and sort of bring in that sort of that broader perspective and enable you to sort of see that bigger picture and wake up to just how different things are likely to be in the next few years, let alone in the decade ahead. The second thing that I think I really like to leave people with is lots and lots of inspiring examples. So sometimes these big macro challenges can kind of feel overwhelming. So I think there's something about seeing the incredible stuff that's happening already and being inspired by how other businesses are tackling these challenges, and really sort of specific, tangible examples that make it feel like there's actionable stuff that can be done. Which leads to the third point, which is around an audience leaving with a real sense of sort of hope and motivation. So a sense that, there are some quite scary challenges ahead, and it's not like, I think we as a civilization are probably in for a bit of a bumpy ride. We know that there's a certain amount of climate breakdown locked in now, but I think it's really important that people are leaving with a sense of motivation and hope and agency. And I really want people to sort of be leaving a talk kind of fired up to make stuff happen, rather than kind of feeling demotivated. So seeing the bigger picture, having some really tangible, inspiring examples, and feeling inspired, hopeful, and motivated.